So let's get right into it. There's a powerful new political strategy that's quietly but completely changing the balance of power in America. It's giving state governments a whole new level of control over our cities. And believe it or not, it all started with a simple, common-sense rule right in the heart of Texas.
I want you to just picture this for a second. It's the middle of summer in Austin or Dallas. The temperature is soaring past 110 degrees. You've got construction workers out there building our cities in just brutal, dangerous conditions. So local governments did what they're supposed to do, right? They passed these simple ordinances requiring companies to give these workers a 10-minute water break every 4 hours. I mean, a simple life-saving measure.
But then, in 2023, that rule just vanished. And it wasn't just the water break rule. We're talking hundreds of other local protections. Everything from renters' rights to basic consumer protections. They were all wiped off the books, almost overnight. So how did that happen?
Yeah, how did this happen? These rules weren't debated and repealed one by one. No, they were annihilated all at once by a single, unbelievably powerful state law. A law so sweeping and destructive that its opponents gave it a nickname that, honestly, is pretty fitting: the Death Star.
And that brings us to the law itself, Texas House Bill 2127. You have to understand, this wasn't some surgical strike against one specific policy. This was designed to be a blueprint for total control.
The sheer scope of this law is really what makes it so powerful. It doesn't just ban one policy here or another one there. Instead, it uses this legal doctrine called field preemption to just blast apart entire sections of local authority. Basically, it says that if the state has any law in a certain field, let's say labor or housing or the environment, then the state now occupies the field. And just like that, poof, all local rules in that entire category are gone. I mean, think about that. No more local minimum wage hikes, no stricter local pollution rules, no added renter protections. It's a legislative clean slate.
So what's the official rationale? Well, proponents, like Governor Greg Abbott, argue it's all about creating consistency. They say they want one single, predictable set of rules for businesses all across Texas, freeing them from what they call a hodgepodge of different local ordinances. For the business groups who back this, it's all about streamlining regulation. But to really understand its true power, we need to look under the hood. We've got to check out the legal machinery that makes this Death Star strategy actually work. This is where we go from the what to the how.
Now, state preemption isn't new, but this modern version is radically different. See, traditionally, states used what's called floor preemption. They'd set a minimum standard, like a statewide minimum wage, and cities were totally free to build on top of that floor with higher wages if they wanted. But the Death Star model, it uses ceiling preemption. The state rule isn't a floor anymore, it's a ceiling. It's the absolute maximum, and cities are legally forbidden from passing anything stronger or more protective. And this is where that field preemption idea becomes a total game changer. Think of it this way. The old method was like playing whack-a-mole. The state had to smack down each new city ordinance one by one. Field preemption is like unplugging the entire arcade. The state just declares its authority over the whole game and game over. And all of this leads to maybe the most important shift of all, a change that we can boil down to this one simple question.
And the answer to that question, well, it reveals the real heart of the strategy, what some are calling the structural veto. Before, the state had the burden of proof. They had to prove a city couldn't pass a law. Now that's completely flipped. A city has to prove it has explicit, direct permission from the state to pass pretty much any local rule. And this shift makes trying to solve local problems legally treacherous and super expensive, which effectively chills new ideas before they can even get started.
You know, a strategy this effective was never going to stay just in Texas. The Death Star has become a blueprint, and now we're seeing it go national.
Over in Tennessee, you've got a similar strategy called municipal containment that's targeting cities like Nashville on everything from police oversight to gun safety. Then you have Florida, which has pioneered something called super preemption, and this is wild. It not only voids local laws, but it adds punitive measures, like being able to fine local officials personally if they even dare to vote for one. The pattern here is crystal clear. Use one giant law to preemptively outlaw anything a city might try to do in the future.
So what's the end game here? What makes this strategy so appealing to the people pushing it? Well, it turns out it's not just about specific policies. It's about controlling the very places where new ideas are born, the laboratories of democracy themselves.
The strategic logic is frankly brilliantly simple. First, it's efficient. Why fight hundreds of little local battles when you can win the entire war with just one bill? Second, it's about control.
It lets state legislatures force their ideology on these large urban centers that often have very different political views. And finally, and this is so important, it creates a chilling effect. It discourages local leaders from even trying to solve their own unique local problems. And every now and then, the quiet part gets said out loud. This quote from a lawmaker just perfectly captures the ideological shift, that traditional American idea of local control. The idea that the government closest to the people governs best, it's been completely turned on its head. For them, local control now literally means state control.
And this is exactly why it all matters. This isn't just some abstract legal debate happening in a state house somewhere. It brings us right back to where we started this whole conversation. The real-world cost is immediate and it's tangible. It's construction workers losing the right to a water break and deadly heat. It's tenants losing protection from unfair evictions, and it's entire communities losing the power to solve their own problems.
And this really reveals the ultimate stakes. The Death Star strategy isn't just about erasing laws that already exist. It's about preventing future solutions from ever even being considered. Which leaves us with a final and pretty critical question. What happens to a democracy when its local ideas are outlawed before they're even born?